So hopefully you're all here today to talk about or hear about certification processes. It's a really exciting, sexy topic, and there's a lot of detail in here, but I'm also going to give you a lot of references that you can go to and check offline at some point in time. A little bit about myself. Susan Fink. I am the owner and brewmaster at Karma Kombucha in Illinois, not in France. I started the business probably about 5 years ago now, and my background, I've spent 35 years, so that pretty much dates me. In the food industry, primarily working in manufacturing and operations and research and development. And this was something I actually learned about. Kombucha was something I learned about on a project I was working on where we were studying baby boomers and found out that one of their key needs was to try to figure out a way to detox. And so kombucha was one of the things that popped up in our research. And I'm like, what the heck's kombucha? I had never heard of it before. This goes back to about 2007. And sure enough, I started homebrewing it and perfecting it and just fell in love with it. So when I lost my corporate job back in 2010, decided to throw caution to the wind and started up our own brewery. So it's pretty much where we're at. I know a lot about, like I said, manufacturing and R&D types of things, but certification is part of the process. I know quite a bit about organic since we are an organic certified operation. The other ones are things that I've kind of learned about, but I'm not even going to profess to be an expert in the area. But if you do have questions, please fire away with them. Also, if anybody wants to reach out to me for any particular reason, my email address is susan@karmabucha, BOOCHA.com, and I'm always here to help people. Just try to answer questions, especially if they're anything around technical or manufacturing scale, things like that. So, cool. All right, we're going to get started. I'm going to break out the presentation into the different types of certifications. We're going to go through and first of all talk about probably the biggest and broadest area that I think people have interest in, and that's organic and non-GMO. Then we'll talk a little bit about more social types of certifications that would fall into B Corp as well as fair trade. We'll then talk about more free from or allergen type of certifications, religious, and you see that kosher is up here, but halal is not. Halal is actually a Muslim certification, and because there is a trace amount of alcohol, you will not certify a product as halal, so I left that off the list. And then last but not least, probably one of the newer categories that's starting to take hold is around food safety, especially with the new Food Safety Modernization Act, which I talked about last year. You're starting to see more and more certifications around food safety. And I haven't seen any really yet in the kombucha industry, and it's starting to just evolve. It's actually happening a lot, too, in food service operations that you're seeing now. So we'll get into organic. The definition of organic right now is that any products that contain 95% or more of organic content, and this is on a dry basis, so it's after you remove the water, can be called organic and carry the USDA symbol. Any products that have anywhere from 70 or more, up to that 95%, can say made from organic, but they cannot carry the seal. And then anything less than 70%, say you may be just using organic sugar or organic tea, and it doesn't still comprise that 70%. I think in kombucha it probably does, though. You can only state that it's organic on the ingredient line statement only. And this isn't just for labeling either. This also applies to any sort of print material you have, website, ad copy, anything. Any sort of media. If you put organic on there and you're not certified, you're in deep trouble. So just want to make you aware. I think Justin talked a little bit about that as far as claims go yesterday, that it spans beyond the reach of just the label. So with organic certification, it kind of starts with the whole process of USDA as the overarching body in control of this. Through that, they work with certifiers, which are responsible for reviewing, inspecting, and certifying the practices of not only organic farms, but in our case, we would be considered organic processors. I'm going to go through this. Certifiers, and really, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. There's a lot of detail, but you'll have this available to you on the website, so please refer back to it. But the certifiers, and this is where it's interesting, they can not only be private entities, but they can also be state entities and foreign governments. So it's kind of a very broad spectrum of certifiers. There's over 80 of them around the world. And if you're looking for one in your area, most of them work across all 50 states, but if you're looking, some of them have different pricing structures. Some of them may be in your area, and because you have to pay for the travel expense of the auditor, you may want to find one more in your region. Please visit the USDA.gov site, and there is a list of all the certifiers in your area. So the accredited certifiers are really the bodies that are responsible for evaluating your application. They're responsible then for reviewing the organic system plan. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about the organic system plan. It's literally the backbone of the organic program for your specific operations. And then they're also responsible for conducting on-site inspections. They will also approve your labels, and they're also responsible then for enforcing USDA regulations. As a processor, it's your responsibility to apply for it and then develop your organic system plan. Again, I'll keep talking about this. It's quite a lengthy, I mean, our binder is about this thick. It's a pretty detailed, comprehensive overview of your operations, and we'll go into more detail on that. You will also undergo an annual inspection on site. Some of them may be an unannounced inspection. A lot of the bigger operations, they do kind of just random inspections. You are responsible for producing under the organic system plan and maintaining that plan, and then making sure that you've got the appropriate labeling. So the organic system plan is written by you, the producer. Now, it's not to say you have to do the whole thing. I know my first one, I was kind of at a loss as to how to do it. There are agencies out there that can help you with the process. I know one of them is one of the KBI sponsors. It's called AgriSystems International. They can come in. They've got all the boilerplate templates for a lot of the information, and it makes it very, very simple for you just to add in your components of it. Again, it's then reviewed by the certifier and validated through the annual inspections. You update it annually, and actually you have to update it actually as you have any sort of changes. So if you're adding a new flavor, if you're swapping out an ingredient, if you've modified your manufacturing process to some extent, all of that needs to be updated and reviewed with your certifier prior to actually implementing it to make sure that it's in compliance. And then again, if you're really looking for some good templates rather than working with a third party, the USDA has some great ones on this link here, but you can also go to Oregon TILF, which is one of the major certifiers in the U.S. They have a really good website that has some templates on there that you can review to see what kind of information you're going to need for this. So the organic system plan, and I know this is getting into fine print, but I think, again, I said this is really the backbone of the organic program. As you sit down and write this, you're going to go through and literally list out your practices and procedures within your facility. So you're going to want to include a site map, literally a layout of your facility and where things are. They're going to want to know where your pest control bait stations are. They're going to want to know your process flow, and it's primarily if you're working with organic and non-organic products, which I don't think many of us have cross issues with, but for some people, you've got to keep the flows completely separate. The other thing you need to do is have a list of all the substances that you use in the production and handling. So this is everything from listing out your formulas and all the ingredients that you use. You want to make sure that you have up-to-date, and they're annual coming in from your suppliers as well, all of their organic certificates to back up the fact that you are using organic products that are certified through the USDA as well. This goes even so far as to say not just your tea and your sugar and your flavors and things like that, but your internally manufactured products, your SCOBY, they're going to want to see records to show that you have produced this on organic substrate over time. Same thing with your starter tea if you're brewing in that method. And then also they even dive into wanting to look at your packaging suppliers and make sure that you're not having any sort of pesticide residue, for instance, on your bottles or anything that may be coming in from a packaging perspective. So you just need letters or affidavits from your supplier stating that it's free and clear of pesticides. You're going to need copies of all your finished labels. You're going to also need a copy of your village or city's water analysis records. Not sure, is anybody using well water? That might be, I'm not exactly sure how they do that. They might require you to actually have the water tested periodically, but I'm not sure about the frequency of it. You're going to have to also have a very detailed sanitation protocol laying out what you use, what chemicals are being used in the sanitation process, at what levels, and how you're actually cleaning your products, or your equipment, I should say. And then also your pest control procedures. So what are you utilizing? Are you using an integrated pest management system versus chemical applications? If you're using bait stations, what are they and where are they placed? Are they away from the products so that there's absolutely no commingling or contamination? Then you're also going to need to have kind of a description of how you're moving product from receiving through in-process to storage to outbound. So making sure that you're not, again, having any cross-contamination with non-organic components. And then from a detailed record-keeping perspective, you need to make sure that you're tracing lot numbers of all your incoming raw materials. that you have a really good way to trace your finished goods, I should say your incoming ingredients to your finished goods. So what we typically do at the end of the year when we have our inspection, we do kind of a mass balance spreadsheet that says these are all of our tea purchases, these are all of our sugar purchases throughout the year, and this is the batches that we produced and the outgoing amount. And those should balance out to 0, or at least you're having a loss and not a gain, because a gain would show that you're using something that's not organic in the process, if that makes sense. The other thing that's really important here too is that they're going to ask you to have a recall procedure in place, which is very important if we would ever have an issue where, say, the sugar came in and there was an issue with contamination, that you're actually able to trace your sugar from incoming material to where it went on the outbound side of things. The nice thing about pulling all this stuff together too is we talked a little about the KBI verification process that we're planning to implement coming up. If you actually are organic certified, you've probably accomplished a greater than 50% of the verification details, and you can just check the box, which is very nice. And then, last but not least, I think I've talked a lot about the commingling. So when you update the organic, I think I've talked a little bit about this. I'm not going to go through a ton of detail, but anytime you have any changes to your process, your ingredients, your labels, anything you're doing with the sanitation protocol, that needs to be reviewed and updated in your organic system plan and worked through with the certifiers. The other thing, I'll get to that down there too. So excluded methods, things besides for not having non-organic ingredients, is that you cannot use any genetic engineering. So organic means non-GMO. I mean, that's the nice benefit of it. If you are organic certified, and I think there's still a ton of consumer confusion out there because you've got, and I'll talk about that next, you've got the non-GMO verified symbol as well as organic. If you are organic, you are non-GMO. And I think who's doing a great job with getting consumers educated on this is Organic Valley. I just saw they have a new symbol on their products that said organic is non-GMO. So I think we're starting to get that communication through to consumers. The other part of it is you can't use ionizing radiation. I don't think that's a big issue unless people are potentially using spices and spice blends in some of their blends, tea blends. And then sewage sludge, which again, I don't think is an issue here either. And the one thing I just want to point out, this is actually a government mandated policy, and so if you are making any claims about organic or using the symbol erroneously, it is civil penalties up to $11,000 per offense, and you can actually lose your ability to use that symbol ever again. So, it's government regulated. So this is what I was talking about in the comparison of non-GMO to organic. Non-GMO is actually only meaning non-GMO. That's all it is. Organic covers so many other things. You can't use pesticides, you can't use herbicides, you can't use hexane as a solvent for some things. Sewage sludge, any sort of antibiotics or any other sort of drug residues. Everything that's in there is excluded from organic, not necessarily though with non-GMO. And that's one thing I should have mentioned earlier too. You saw that chart that I first had up there with all the certifications, and a lot of people are like, okay, if you had to prioritize, what's the most important? Because bottom line, it comes down to how much money do you have? Does it blend in with what your company's philosophy is? What do you want to stand for and what do you want to represent? And then also, how much label space do you actually have to put all these different certifications on? It takes away from you being able to communicate your message or any other sort of like romance copy that's on your bottle. So in some cases, I often say, I think non-GMO verified is very critical for products that have high-risk GMO products, so things like wheat-containing products, soy-containing products. Sugar beets is an issue, but if you're organic, again, most of that is cane, and there's really not the issue with it. So again, if I had to put my money on one versus the other, I would go organic route. But that being said, some people want to say, I want to have it tested to prove it, and that's really the difference here, is with non-GMO verified, you're actually going through a third-party verification process, not just the certification process with organic, that is actually going to test the ingredients, especially if they're high risk. And related to kombucha, again, it's sugar beets if you're using sugar beets. If you're using organic, you probably can't because most sugar beets are GMO. Honey and even some of the microbial cultures and yeasts and flavorings. So even with organic, they have to go back. So for instance, some of our tea blends have natural flavors in them. They're not organic flavors, but they are natural flavors. We have to literally go back to that flavor supplier and make sure that the ethanol that is used as a carrier for the flavor comes from non-GMO corn. So it's quite an extensive process when they do that. And And again, that's why I always say organic kind of trumps non-GMO unless you're in a really high-risk category. So again, non-GMO verified is only utilized in the US and Canada. That's another thing I wanted to point out as well. And again, it's going through testing, and again, not finished product testing. They have found that that's not completely accurate, so they go back to the ingredients and actually test those for the DNA to find out if there is any sort of genetically modified material in there. I'm not going to go through all the details, but this will be in the material online, that if you're interested in pursuing this, this is kind of the steps you would take. Any questions on organic or GMO? On GMO? Yes?
Can you simply, if you're not going for
I'm sorry, can you just use the mic? Yeah.
If you're not going for certification and you're using certified products in your product, what claims can you make on your product knowing you're using certified products?
From an organic perspective, you can say organic tea, organic sugar in your ingredient line. If it's more than 70%, you can actually make the claim of made with organic ingredients.
But to do that, you need to have it certified that it is more than 70%.
Nobody's going to come after you because, again, it's not a government. The seal is what really is they're going to come after you for. It's just you can back it up then if anybody would ever challenge you on that. And we'll talk more about that too, because it does come into play when we talk about gluten-free and vegan.
Okay.
A lot more, because there really is it's a certification that you'll get at least to use a seal, but you can still use those claims and not get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Yes? I know, we should pass the mic around.
You said something earlier, and I just might have missed it, so I just wanted you to clarify. So the whole issue of the 70% of ingredients, are we talking about like just, if it's just tea and sugar that we're talking about, like if those are your main ingredients, those are the two things that need to be certified organic, right?
The two key things, as well as any of your starter tea and your scobies. Like, for instance, when we started out, and I don't know where our certifier came up with this random number, but we had to demonstrate that we had grown our SCOBY through 17 generations on organic substrate, on organic tea and organic sugar.
And 17 generations can mean like 17 batches, like continuous batches, like week after week.
Correct.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be the same SCOBY. It can be the babies from that, but it's saying that you've produced this internally manufactured ingredient on organic substrate. Yeah. And the 70% is on a dry basis, so once you remove the water, you're probably at even 95%. Yeah. Okay, yes?
Can you clarify some things about natural flavors? Because I think it's, for me at least, really misunderstood, because we're trying to transition into using a tea that does contain natural flavors, and we were nervous about having to put that on our label and what that means and how people perceive that when they see natural flavors listed on something.
I don't think there's a ton of research out about that. I know, artificial flavors is clearly off the charts, but I think natural, people would rather, in my opinion, in the natural channel especially, see products that contain the natural components. So if you're using ginger, they want to see ginger root, not ginger flavor. Sometimes we can't always get the best flavor from that, so natural is a way to boost that and enhance it. And again, I think they still can be naturally derived. Again, look at what substances you're using. They're not hexane extracted, especially if we're going organic route. They're not, the carrier isn't going to be from a GMO-based ethanol, from corn-derived ethanol. So they're very clean products. It's just, I think it's consumer perception. And I don't think natural flavors is that big of an issue with the natural channel.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any perspective on that?
From what I know, that when it says natural, it has to be, a lot of the components that make that flavor are from like the earth, like from different bottles or something like that. So, because I've looked into that too a lot, because I was concerned about the perception from the consumer of a natural flavored product. So, from what I've talked to with the different companies, I feel more confident about a naturally flavored product.
Right. Yeah, and the interesting thing is, if you've ever worked with a flavor house and really understand how they make some of these natural flavors, lots of times an orange flavor doesn't necessarily come from oranges. It can come up from other products that mimic the orange flavor, but it's still naturally derived.
For that example, that's the exact other question I wanted to ask. For like an orange flavor, it may come from other like botanical type flavors that make up what we perceive as an orange flavor.
Correct.
do you think it's worth looking into the actual things that go into that orange flavor and listing them on the label? Or do you think just say, like, screw it and write natural flavors?
I think it's only going to cause more consumer confusion, so I think using the broad category of natural flavors is acceptable.
Thank you.
Now, we've gotten some consumer comments on it. I wouldn't say it's complaints, but I have gotten people who are actually completely adverse to adding any flavor that isn't derived strictly from, like, the orange, in this case being orange juice or something. But I think it's far and few between.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next topic, and now we're starting to move into the area of social responsibility. So B Corp is actually a certification that's global. This is one based completely on, and I'm not that aware of it, and I don't think there are any kombucha brewers today carrying B Corp status, but I have talked to a few people who are interested in pursuing it. B Corp is all around your company's values and being sure that you're buttoned up from a social and environmental performance standpoint, and accountability and transparency in your practices. There are 1,600, though, certified B Corps. A lot of them tend to be more in line with, like, the fair trade philosophy. So they may be companies that are working on chocolate products coming from the cacao industry, where it might be more of a third world entity. They do come from 42 countries, like I said, and 120 different industries. So it's quite a diverse platform. Some of it isn't even food-based. It's just, it's more of a company philosophy. They do have a declaration of interdependence, which you can read there. And I'll try to skim into the next area. In this case, the certification is for a 2-year period, but you do pay annually for it. And again, this isn't so much about the product, it's more about your accountability and traceability and social responsibility. Again, I won't spend a ton of time on this. This is one where they actually did publish their fees. And I didn't even mention this either, but people have questions about organic certification and the costs associated with that. It's all going to be dependent upon, for instance, the complexity of your operation. Do you have commingled products? How many SKUs do you have in your line? Do you have 20? Do you have 2? It makes a very big difference in regards to the complexity of your operation. Just to give you an example from our case, we currently have 7 SKUs in our line. We have a very straightforward process where we don't have any commingling of non-organic products. Our fees every year are about $1,400 for the application and review of our organic system plan. Now that is completely developed, so that's me doing all the legwork on the organic system plan, plus the cost of the inspector's travel. And if you're lucky enough, I've also got a organic certifier who's a rabbi, so he can do kosher at the same time, which is a nice win. So anyway, for what it's worth, if you're, I don't want to necessarily put a plug out for him, but he's a very reasonably priced. It's natural food certifiers. They do a really good job with the program too, and I think they're one of the cheaper options. But please check into it. Again, with B Corp, you can see this is totally on a sliding scale based on your revenue, so you kind of just get an idea of what the costs are related to carrying this certification. Fair trade. Fair trade has gotten complex. We were fair trade certified when we first started out, because I clearly believe in their principles and philosophies, but they've gotten so complex because they've now split into 2 entities. There's Fair Trade USA, and there's FLOW, which is the international body of it. So this is a global certification again, but a little bit of complexity, especially if you're buying ingredients that may carry the FLOW certification and trying to get Fair Trade USA certification. So it's a little bit of complexity. Fair trade goes a little bit beyond B Corp because this talks more about environmental standards as well as the economic standards of the farmers and workers involved in your products. The environmental standards are a little more strict. It talks about protecting your water resources and your vegetation, so you're not stripping down the earth. I talked about this agricultural diversification. You can't do any slash and burn types of things with like palm operations. It restricts the use of pesticides and fertilizers. They ban GMO, which is another thing that works really nice if you have an organic and a fair trade certification. And it talks a lot about energy utilization, waste management, things like that. With fair trade, the key component of it is you will get a online upload of your purchases on a semi-annual basis that you need to report in, and that's really the only part of it. Once you get certified, it's just reporting in your purchases and your outgoing ingredients, again, that mass balance. They do it on a sliding scale basis as well, too. I think for a lot of, when I was going with fair trade, they do it on a sliding scale basis, so a lot of small brewers, the fee is only $1,000 a year. The other thing, though, that you can do, again, If you want to carry the symbol, you have to pay for that. But there's no reason that you can't asterisk your ingredients and say fair trade certified. So what we've been doing is just asterisking, say that fast, your tea and your sugar, and then just saying fair trade certified on the label, and that's absolutely appropriate. So the same thing with social media. Anything in those cases, you can't say you're fair trade certified, but you can say that we use fair trade certified ingredients. Just make sure you back it up with those certificates that come from the suppliers. Anything on social? Okay. We'll move next into the allergen-based stuff. Gluten-free. So today, the FDA has standards for labeling a product as gluten-free as anything that does not contain wheat, rye, or barley, and it has to be less than 20 parts per billion of gluten, the protein. So that's kind of a passive statement, and you can, in your operation, call yourself gluten-free. There's no reason you can't. Again, if you maintain that you don't have any of these ingredients in your process, and I would even go further to say in our facility what we do is we have a gluten-free policy. We don't allow any gluten in, even with your lunch. So, for instance, just keep the gluten out of the facility, and you can actually make that claim, and you shouldn't have any issues. With the gluten-free certification, though, they take it to another level, and this is really, I think, extremely critical for people who have celiac disease, because I think their tolerance level is very, very low. They require that you have to have an upper limit of 10 parts per million of gluten. And this is actually done through verification of the ingredients, especially any that may have potential high risk. Again, here's the whole process. I'm not going to go into details about that. It's just taking it down to a much lower threshold to get the certification process. Vegan, another one. You can clearly, if your product that is not made with any animal-based products, and that includes honey, you can claim vegan. You just won't carry the certification as well. So vegan goes pretty deep into it, not necessarily with our area. I don't think with kombucha, other than honey, there really are any issues related to it. So you can make the claims of vegan on your label as well. I think that vegan tends to work better in other applications that there might be or questionable, whether it could have been an original dairy or meat-based source. So I think for other industries, it probably has greater implications. Again, long process. I'm not going to go through the details of it. Moving now into the religious area, really kosher is the big one. Kosher certification, it's a little bit different in that they do review your ingredients. They also review your process. And it applies not only to food products, but also food operations. Covers basically anything related to Jewish dietary laws. So the certification agency has to be an approved rabbinical council. They do make on-site visits, and they're going to literally review all of your ingredients, all of your processes, all of your cleaning processes, all of your chemicals that are being used in the process. Say about this. Oh, and then they will do a designation. These are just some of the ones listed here, but they will either designate it as dairy, meat, parve, or kosher for Passover. I think in our case it's parve because it means it's not meat, it's not dairy. There are over, and this is again a global certification, there are over 1,100 kosher certification agencies in the world. The big five, though, in the U.S. are Circle U, OK, KOF, and Star K, and the Chicago Rabbinical Council as well. So you may see those designations, all of them carry the same weight, and you'll also see other ones that may apply for some of our international counterparts. I'm not sure what they are specifically, but they're probably more country or region specific. Again, just to go into a little more detail here, probably the biggest issue is if you're producing a kosher and a non-kosher product in the same facility, you have to have absolute segregation or thorough cleaning in between runs. I don't think that really applies to any of us. It's a much more straightforward process. Again, it's a one-year contract, and it is a global certification. And then, yeah. You know, they did not publish those, and I'm not privy to that, but you might want to touch base with the health aid folks because I think they're one of the ones that is gluten-free certified.
Okay.
Thank you. Of it. Some of them publish their fees and some of them don't. That's why I put up the ones from B Corp because it was really one of the only ones I saw online. And then last but not least, food safety certifications. Like I said, this is something that's more new. I haven't seen a lot of them on food-based products yet, but I think we're starting to see more and more come about with the implementation of FSMA, or the Food Safety Modernization Act. So what this is basically it's just a third-party audit of your facility where they're going to come in and review everything from a food safety perspective as far as how you're handling the products, how you're processing the products, traceability, records, and record keeping involved with that as well. Again, there's multiple agencies. This is all under the Global Food Safety Initiative, but there are numerous agencies that are responsible for certification. SQF and BRC are probably the two biggest ones in the U.S. I just got the 5-minute card, so we're going to open it up for questions right now. 45 minutes went quick.
So in order to be a B Corp, do you need to have all your ingredients be fair trade? Because there's a...
It's a good question. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. For instance, I know in a lot of one of our issues with fair trade is if you buy your tea from Japan, you can't get fair trade tea. It's not a country that you have to worry or be concerned with labor practices and things like that. So to address that question, if you were buying a tea from Japan, you still could apply for B Corp.
Okay. I have one more question.
Yeah.
Is it worth it to certify organic, since you can accomplish the same end result by just listing your label as containing organic ingredients and not going through the whole painful process?
You know, I think it's dependent on your consumer, and I think it's dependent on your customer. A lot of the channels are now almost requiring it as an entity to get into as a category, or be I hate to say it, as a competitive advantage. But if you carry the seal, I think it carries some weight with certain customers, some of the bigger customers anyway. With consumers, no, I think in all honesty, I think as long as they see that it's certified or organic ingredients, they trust the manufacturer, especially in our segment. So.
Thank you.
Yep. I think it's also company philosophy. It's just that, you want to stand behind that.
With the kosher, does the rabbi just come once a year, or how often do they?
They typically come once a year for the annual inspection, unless you're going to go for kosher for Passover, then they come in at that time too. But typically, I don't think anybody's going to go through that process.
No. And the other thing I had wanted to ask was, I saw a fair trade ingredients symbol.
Actually, I don't even think you can. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about that. But if I know Jewish dietary law, Passover doesn't allow any fermentation, so like unleavened bread.
No, you got wine on the Passover table, on the Seder table.
Pardon?
You got wine on the Seder table. Yeah, you got to have Manischewitz.
Then,
But
you may be able to.
we don't have to talk about Passover. I saw a symbol for just fair trade ingredients. Would that be able to go on your bottle just because you have like one or two fair trade ingredients?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to think. I think in our case, all of the ingredients that could be fair trade were fair trade certified, so we actually carry the fair trade symbol, not just the ingredient. But for instance, say somebody may be using maybe making a chocolate, and the cacao comes from a fair trade.
Yeah, like if our sugar is fair trade, Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
So you can carry both. It's just fair trade symbol that says everything is. Any other questions?
How about sustainability as far as certification? Is there such a thing?
I don't know if there is. I wouldn't doubt that that's going to be something that does come up. I think certain industries have more of that. Like I know the paper industry has a big, the forest certification. They have different symbols. I think it falls underneath B Corp because that's a component of it, as well as not necessarily fair trade, but the B Corp does have more of the social responsibility, and I think that would also include a sustainability play.
I got to follow up with a kosher. We work out of a shared kitchen facility. Yeah. Would that be a big problem if, say, someone on another day was processing meat and then cheese on the next day?
The same thing comes up with organic, and as long as you can prove that you've got a thorough cleaning in between, you're good to go. It's the same thing as a manufacturer who would be making kosher and non-kosher items on the same line. They just have to have very thorough cleaning protocol in place.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. That can be a nightmare, though, in a shared kitchen. I know that. Yes?
What symbols can you use, kind of like what you're talking about with fair trade? What symbols can you use in your label if you're not paying for certification, but you can prove the thing is true?
Yeah, the question is for fair trade, what symbols can be used if you're using fair trade ingredients, but not necessarily going through and paying for it. You cannot use the symbol at all. No, but you can, like I said, you can asterisk your ingredients and just say fair trade certified as long as you have the documentation to support it. You know, you can't use the symbols. Again, you have to pay for those and go through the certification process, but it doesn't preclude you from making a claim of vegan and gluten-free. Yeah.
The name of organic ingredients, you heard me use that earlier. Is that something that's only listed on that side panel of the ingredients, or is it something that can be on the front?
It can be on the front. Yeah, it just, you can't say organic. Made with organic, yep. Yeah. No, and then you would actually put organic ingredients in the ingredient list, but you could make that claim on the front, on the primary display panel. No other questions? Everybody still looks sleepy. I know it was a really exciting topic, but... All right, guys, well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, like I said, there's some really good templates in here with the links, and just refer back to the presentation, which should be, I think, loaded up onto the forum in the next 2 weeks.